It was April 1st, 2014, when two young backpackers set out to explore the lush peaks of Panama's Continental Divide. Armed with a simple map, a camera, and the carefree spirits of youth, neither could fathom the nightmarish turn their adventure would soon take. Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon launched their ill-fated hike around noon that April 1st. They smiled radiantly, posing for selfies along the jungle trail, blissfully unaware these would be the last photos ever taken of them alive. Just 8 hours later, urgent calls are made from the woman's cell phones to emergency contacts. But the calls drop with their cries for help left unanswered. Silence. Then for 10 long weeks, nothing. No further contact or sightings of the vanished travelers. It's not until a single backpack mysteriously appears miles from their last known location. Containing scattered remains and a camera with deleted photos, the bag's contents raised far more questions than answers. Soon, accusations erupt, suspicions flare. How could Kris and Lisanne have possibly met such a violent, inexplicable end while simply lost in the wilderness? Who erased that crucial photo taken just before their disappearance? And why do officials seem so eager to slam this case as an accident when so much critical evidence still fails to line up? Today, we re-examine the haunted final days of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Delve into government cover-ups, suppression of vital facts, and why selective evidence leaks suggest sinister foul play is the only scenario that lines up. Could these women have fallen victim to extremely dark criminal forces involving the Panamanian authorities themselves? Or even murder by contract killing? Who or what is still lurking undisclosed in those cloud forests? The disturbing truth still waits to be unearthed. In March 2014, 24-year-old Kris Kremers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon flew to Panama for a 6-week graduation vacation. This was meant to be the trip of a lifetime for the two young Dutch women. They started off relaxing on the beaches of Boca del Toro, where they brushed up on their Spanish skills and soaked up the sun. Then, after 2 weeks of fun in the sun, they headed inland to Boquete, a small mountain town known for its beautiful landscapes and cooler climate. Here in Boquete, Kris and Lisanne planned to volunteer with local children for a month while continuing to work on their Spanish. But when they showed up, there was a mismatch in expectations. They were told volunteer jobs didn't start for another week. So how did Kris and Lisanne choose to spend this unexpected free time? On April 1st of 2014, just 1 day before they were scheduled to begin volunteering, Kris and Lisanne decided to check out a nearby hiking trail called Pianista. The weather was sunny and clear that morning, perfect for exploring the local mountains. After stopping for brunch with some Dutch tourists, the girls caught a taxi to drop them off at the Pianista Trail around 11 a.m. They were equipped only with a light backpack containing phones, a camera, some cash, and bottled water. Standard fare for a day hike. Little did they know, this would be the last time they were seen alive. Now, I should note, the Pianista Trail itself is not particularly long or difficult. It's an out-and-back hike with a peak elevation of around 4,000 feet. Sources estimate that it would take a reasonably fit person about 2.5 to 3 hours to complete. But here's the thing, Kris and Lisanne didn't just complete the Pianista Trail hike as planned. At some point past the peak lookout, they decided to keep going deeper into the forest beyond the typical turnaround point. And it's here where things start to get dicey. You see, the trails beyond Pianista are not well-marked tourist routes. We're talking steep ravines, raging rivers, and rugged terrain even the locals tread very carefully in. Why would two bright, young women keep venturing into such risky unknown territory with barely any supplies? Well, that's just one of the many perplexing questions surrounding this case. On April 2nd, when Kris and Lisanne failed to show up for their scheduled outing with a local guide, their host family became concerned. By April 3rd, they were reported missing. For the next 10 days, local authorities searched vigorously for the missing women by land and air. This includes helicopters, dogs teams, and the help of residents who knew the terrain well. On April 6th, 5 days after the hike began, Kris and Lisanne's parents flew in from the Netherlands to aid search efforts alongside Dutch detectives. But despite deploying specialized rescue teams over this 10-day search period, not a single trace of the women emerged. No belongings, No clues as to their whereabouts, nothing. It was like they vanished into thin air. Where could Kris and Lisanne possibly be? Were they lost wandering the dense jungle hurt or starving? Could they have fallen victim to a wild animal or a nefarious criminal? As each day passed with no sign of the girls, hope dimmed for ever finding them alive again. But then, a critical discovery turned the case on its head yet again. In mid-June, 10 full weeks after Kris and Lisanne initially went missing, a local woman stumbled upon a backpack on a riverbank near a remote village. This village was situated about 10 miles from Bocat and 5 miles from the summit of La Pianista Trail. Inside this backpack were items belonging to Kris and Lisanne: phones, cash, sunglasses, and most chillingly, Lisanne's camera containing eerie photos. Here's why this discovery was so shocking. First, authorities had supposedly already searched the area near where the backpack emerged. How did they miss this critical piece of evidence? And second, though the backpack had allegedly been out in the jungle for 10 whole weeks, the contents inside were mysteriously dry and in good condition. Wouldn't a cheap backpack left out in the rainforest be weathered or warped? Wouldn't the electronics have some water damage after weeks fully submerged during the rainy season? Finding it dry and intact seemed fishy. So what was actually on Lisanne's camera? Well, those photos offer some truly bizarre and cryptic clues. Over 100 pictures were salvaged from the memory card in Lisanne's Canon camera, and they included some real head-scratchers. The initial photos from April 1st were happy snaps of Kris and Lisanne smiling in the sunshine, posing for selfies along the trail. But the last daytime photo, number 508, shows Kris looking anxious as the light starts to fade. They seem to be clearly off trail, standing in a stream bed surrounded by dense jungle and steep ravines. Alarm bells should have been going off for them at this point. Now, notably, there is also photo number 509 that is mysteriously missing. There's no evidence it was manually deleted by the girls. Digital forensic experts actually determined someone deliberately used a computer to permanently scrub this image from the memory card. So, photo number 509 likely contains something someone didn't want found. But the question is, who erased it? And what was on it that warranted such a complete, irreversible deletion? But here is where things go from strange to downright creepy. 8 days after photo 508 in the early hours of April 8th, the camera begins taking photos again. 90 pictures dated between 1 and 4 a.m. in pitch darkness. Many show only blackness. Some reveal twigs and foliage indicating the camera is laying on the jungle floor. Certain shots were spaced minutes apart, suggesting they were not taken in distress, but intentionally. Maybe Lisanne was using the camera flash to either signal rescuers in the dark wilderness or lighting their way to navigate dangerous terrain and river crossings at night. A few images also appear to show injuries. One is a close-up of Kris, hair matted with blood on her head. Lisanne seemed to be documenting her friend's deteriorating condition. But here's another mystery. How did Lisanne manage to keep operating her camera for over 90 photos 8 nights later, when authorities claim she died shortly after this? Wouldn't the battery be drained by then? And why keep taking pictures in sheer darkness where images would turn out completely black? The contents of Kris and Lisanne's phones also provide more perplexing clues in this mystery. At about 4:30 p.m. on April 1st, the very day they disappeared, both women desperately tried calling emergency numbers multiple times over several hours. The calls went unanswered, unable to connect due to poor reception. Yet somehow, they managed to make a very brief 1 to 2 second connection on April 2nd at dawn before losing the signal entirely. After this failed call on Lisanne's phone, her device ceased operating, likely due to a drained battery. But Kris's iPhone shows a peculiar pattern of being powered on for about an hour on April 11th. This is 11 days into their disappearance, an impressive battery life for an iPhone. Lisanne's Samsung battery died 5 days ago, and someone attempted to unlock Kris's iPhone using the wrong pin. Allegedly, there were 77 unsuccessful attempts to access the phone from April 7th to 10th. Some speculate whether items from the backpack may have been planted to throw off search efforts. So who was meddling with the phones and cameras during those key dates, and why? With clues this baffling, it's no wonder conspiracy theories arrived. Speaking of strange clues in this mystery, in mid-June, around the same time the backpack appeared, searchers made the first grim discoveries of bodily remains belonging to Kris and Lisanne. Scattered bones and pieces of flesh were found near a riverbank over the next months, often many miles apart. One piece was Lisanne's foot, still clad in its hiking boot and sock. Puzzling, however, that her foot wasn't skeletonized. In fact, the flesh was well preserved, containing maggots. This sparked debate on whether it was left out recently or had somehow naturally mummified over months submerged underwater. Yet just a mile upstream near the river, another, more skeletal bone is later confirmed as belonging to Kris. This bone showed odd bleaching, not consistent with the climate. Why would Kris's bones be so much more decomposed than her companions? How could parts of them turn up so far away from each other? Moreover, no soft tissue remained on Kris's bones to allow for toxicology tests. However, there were surprising intact marrow samples preserved inside Lisanne's bones. Perhaps evidence was deliberately destroyed or manipulated on Kris's remains, while Lisanne's were left strangely untouched. Now, neither woman's remains bear any clear sign of trauma from falls or predators. No cutting, hacking, or bullet wounds. However, investigators could not firmly conclude the exact cause of death due to the state of the remains. But some simply don't believe the condition of the body parts are consistent with the official accident theory. In the end, less than 40 bones belonging to Kris and Lisanne were ever recovered. With so few remnants found, theories swirled. Were their bones scattered intentionally? Were the girls murdered and then dismembered? Or did scavenging animals drag their separate corpses miles away from each other over time? With such limited forensic evidence, it's tough to know for sure, but the biggest unanswered questions still remain. What exactly happened to them? How does one piece together all these baffling clues into a plausible explanation? Authorities claim Kris and Lisanne perished shortly after getting lost past the Pianista Trail peak, unable to find their way back. As conditions grew perilous, they suspect Kris died first from a head injury. Then Lisanne, attempting to reach safety solo, ultimately met the same fate from exposure or drowning. Case closed, they say. 2 women tragically felled by misadventure in the harsh jungle. No foul play. But what officials can't seem to reconcile is why Kris and Lisanne would have ventured so absurdly far from Bocat into the heart of the danger zone if they were just lost tourists trying to make their way back. Wouldn't they have turned around once night fell? Were they chased deeper into the wilderness against their will? Could someone have deliberately misled or trapped them out there? Moreover, if a flood washed their remains miles downstream as claimed, why was key evidence still sitting out dry as a bone on that riverbank months later? And who deleted that fateful photo 509? The more you examine it, the more this straightforward accident narrative has critical plot holes beginning to be explored with fresh eyes. Perhaps we've not heard the full truth in this baffling case riddled with clues that still don't quite add up. But until more definitive evidence emerges, the vanishing and tragic end of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon remains an unsettling mystery. So now that you've heard all the details, what do you think happened to Kris and Lisanne? Were their deaths truly just a hiking misadventure, as officials claim, or is something more sinister afoot in this long unsolved case? I hope re-examining the details prompts new debate on wrapping up the loose ends surrounding this shocking Panama disappearance. Let me know your theories below. If you made it to the end of this story, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll unravel even more sinister cases like this in the future, so make sure to turn on the post notifications. Until next time, stay curious and stay woke.